All right. Well, welcome everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today. My name is Gabrielle Wilms, and I'm an organizer with 4Kids. So we're really excited to have some amazing speakers here today to talk about the Family's Top Climate Toolkit. So before we get started, I just wanted to start with the land acknowledgement. As a national network, we live, work, and play across Turtle Island, spanning from Kwanlin Dune and Songhees Nation's territory in the west to the traditional lands of the Innu and Mi'kmaq people in the east. We acknowledge and pay respect to the Indigenous peoples who are the traditional guardians of Turtle Island, the land which is currently known as Canada, and we recognize our duty to walk alongside Indigenous communities to further reconciliation and decolonization efforts. We also recognize our responsibility as settlers to consider our positionality in the spaces we occupy, to act as allies, and to use our voices to speak out against systemic injustices experienced by Indigenous peoples. So if you would like, please feel free to share your traditional territory in the chat from where you're joining today. Okay, so a brief overview of our agenda. So today's discussion will be structured in three main parts. So first, we'll give you a brief introduction to the Families Talk Climate Project. This will cover the why behind the project and what we set out to achieve. Second, we will provide a high-level overview of the Families Talk Climate Toolkit. This is the core resource we've developed based on a year of research and testing, and we're officially launching it today. And finally, we have the most exciting part of the day, examples of intergenerational climate dialogues. So this is what you'll hear from the incredible volunteers who have led these test events in their communities. We'll have some time for Q&A at the end, so please keep putting your questions in the chat as we go. And without further ado, I will pass it to Wyanne to share more about the Families Talk Climate Project and Toolkit. So Wyanne is our network director at 4Kids and a seasoned organizer on many things, including food sovereignty, social, ecological, and climate justice. So I'll pass it over to you, Wyanne.
Thanks so much, Gabrielle. So, before we dive into the case studies that we're going to be hearing more about, I wanted to take a moment to introduce the Families Talk Climate Project. And at its core, this project was designed to answer a really important question. Can intergenerational dialogue be a powerful tool for mobilizing climate action in our communities? Next slide, please. So our primary goal was twofold. First, we wanted to test the effectiveness of intergenerational dialogues as a tool for mobilizing climate action by expanding the climate community through engaging seniors and creating cross-sectional connections. And second, leveraging the outcomes to expand our network and the climate community specifically by engaging seniors, increasing the overall impact by bringing the wisdom and experience and resources of parents and caregivers who make up the 4Kids network and seniors together. So to measure our success, we focused on three key outcomes that we believed the different dialogue methods we were testing should deliver. So the first was strengthen community relationships. So we recognize that climate conversations are often happening in silos, and to us, success meant seeing two key results: building bridges, so literally strengthening the bonds and understanding between younger and older generations in our communities, and second, action from seniors. So we wanted to see a measurable increase in the number of seniors who were actively participating in climate initiatives, bringing their skills and experience and time to the movement. Second, we wanted to learn and document what were effective dialogue models. So the case studies that you're about to hear are the proof points of this. They are testing different approaches so we can compile the best, most replicable methods into a toolkit that others can use. And finally, since 4Kids is a volunteer-led movement, a key outcome was network growth. If these dialogues work, we hope to see increase in excitement and measurable growth in the number of grassroots actions that are being taken in our network and beyond, ensuring that our movement remains strong and sustainable. Next slide, please. Before we even organized the first event, we wanted to make sure that we were building from a strong foundation. And I want to really give credit where credit is due here, that the person who led this work and did a lot of the research and design work is Arij Riaz, who couldn't be here today, but was really the heart of this project. So she started with research and design. We didn't want to reinvent the wheel. We needed to understand what was already working. So Arij did a deep literature review to see what approaches other organizations and researchers had used for intergenerational and climate communication. And this allowed us to identify gaps and to look for areas where we could test new methods that could be highly effective and we hoped scalable for the For Our Kids network and beyond. The next phase was really crucial, and we're going to hear more about this today, but it was testing. So we partnered with community organizations to host 4 distinct Families Talk Climate events in different regions of Canada. And today we're going to hear about Ottawa, PEI, and Nanaimo events. There was also an event that took place in London, Ontario. So the key was using diverse models or testing diverse models. So each of these 4 events used a unique dialogue model or facilitation method. That was our core experiment to see which methods were the most successful at sparking hopeful conversations, bridging generational differences, and most importantly, motivating follow-up action. And this real-world testing provided us with rich practical data. And finally, all of this culminated in the Families Talk Climate Toolkit, which we're launching here today. And this toolkit is a practical step-by-step guide, which is developed directly from the lessons learned and the tested methods. It's a resource that can be used to organize intergenerational dialogues in your own communities. Next slide, please. And so we're so excited to be here and sharing the Families Talk Climate Toolkit with all of you. And we wanted to give you just a little bit of a introduction to what you can expect in this resource. Next slide. So this is a snapshot of what is in the Families Talk Climate Toolkit. And so it's been organized into 5 key sections that can guide organizers from understanding the why to executing the how of intergenerational dialogue. So the first part is why intergenerational climate conversations matter. And so we start by establishing the critical role that these conversations can play in climate justice by building social cohesion and shared agency beyond just sharing facts, and can really bring us together so that there can be, I think, this translation of knowledge and experience across different generations. The second part is the principles for intergenerational dialogue. So this section lays out 7 core principles or guiding philosophies to ensure that every space we create prioritizes empathy, emotional processing, mutual learning, and collective action. And these first 2 sections are mostly based on the literature review that was conducted to build that strong foundation. Thirdly, there's designing the conversation. So we move into actual design, offering guidance on creating an empathetic and inviting atmosphere and encouraging that deep community engagement. The fourth part is methods you can use. And so this is really getting into the practical nuts and bolts of the toolkit. So it provides 5 detailed methods with step-by-step guidance and real-world case examples to suit different settings and different goals. And finally, there's practical tools for organizers. So we offer essential templates for event organizers, sample agendas, facilitator scripts, checklists, communication materials, everything you might need to make the planning and the execution of your event seamless. Next slide, please. So this is a look at what the different methods look like in the toolkit. So the toolkit gives clear guidance on the format, the suggested timeline or duration of the activity, all of the necessary materials and resources that you might need, and a sample agenda. And so the process is broken down into clear steps. So when to use the method, how to use it, tips for facilitators. And every method includes a case study, like this one that's shown here from Prince Edward Island, to show organizers how the method is played out in our real world community settings and the testing that we did. And beyond these methods, the toolkit also provides some practical tools, as I've mentioned. Next slide. So the last section in the toolkit has practical tools all about reducing the burden on those facilitating events. So it includes, as I've mentioned, checklists, communication templates, all of the materials that you might need to ensure that nothing is missed in organizing your event. And so that's a brief kind of snapshot of the toolkit. And we're really excited now to launch into sharing a bit more about those case studies and kind of the testing that we did. So I'll hand it over back to Gabrielle to introduce our speakers.
Thanks so much, Wyanne. So first, we're going to have Rieky Stewart from Climate Legacy speak a little bit about the case study, the event that they organized. Rieky lives in Victoria. Her last step position was the executive director of Oxfam Canada. She also worked as deputy director of the Canadian Council for International Cooperation, taught at St. Francis Xavier University's Coady Institute, and was on staff at CUSO and with the National Farmers Union. After leaving Oxfam Canada, she worked as a consultant on organizational change and gender equality with UN organizations, governments, and NGOs. She's lived across Canada, from British Columbia to Nova Scotia, and also in Asia and Africa. She's been a volunteer teacher, consultant, and board member, and is currently affiliated with Gender at Work and with the Climate Legacy Project. So without further ado, I'll pass it to Rieky. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks, Gabrielle. So in Ottawa, our conversation was designed to explore similarities and differences among the generations in their beliefs and actions, with a view to informing future events and providing follow-up support if requested. There were 10 seniors and 10 university students from the Ottawa area, because that seemed to be the easiest way for us as an organization to organize. The conversation lasted 2.5 hours on a Saturday afternoon. And rather than going through it chronologically, I thought I'd start at the end by showing you a video made by one of the participants. And the final 2 slides in my presentation will describe the design and the lessons learned. So if you could start the video, please, Gabrielle.
Let me know if there's any issues with the sound here. I hope.
Have you ever wished that you could ask older generations what it felt like to live through the social movements we now read about in history books? What it was like to be young when those moments unfolded, to see change coming, to feel it in the streets, or to wonder if it would ever even come?
I stand for the wild things that have no voice in our court.
For many of us, those conversations aren't always easy to access. We may not have the chance to ask our grandparents or elders how they made sense of those times, or how and why they chose to get involved. I got to join an intergenerational conversation between older folks and younger folks, a space to ask real questions, share stories, and reflect together on the climate movement. Seniors and youth were brought into the same room for an honest discussion about climate action across generations, what our generations wonder about each other, what we can learn from one another, and how we could find strength facing wave after wave of overwhelming historical events. I came away from the discussion with a deep sense that we need more of this. More moments of connection, more listening, more learning. Because it can be easy to fall into stereotypes, to assume older generations didn't care, or that younger ones are just naive. But those assumptions ignore something essential, that we are all shaped by the times that we live in, and we all carry pieces of the puzzle forward. What I saw in that room was solidarity, courage, curiosity, a shared desire for justice, for hope, and for a livable future. These kinds of conversations remind us that we are not alone, that across generations we have always had people willing to show up, speak out, and fight for what matters. If we can keep building those bridges, listening to the wisdom of those who came before us, and lifting up the voices rising now, then maybe, just maybe, we'll find the strength we need to meet this moment together. If you'd like to be notified the next time something like this is organized, subscribe to Climate Legacy's newsletter at the link.
Thanks. That was an unsolicited video. It was a delightful surprise. For the design, we kept it quite simple. We asked people to tell us about something that has shifted their perspective. And I think the most warming up answer that we got was from a young woman at Ottawa U who said the most powerful thing that had happened to her in the last 6 months was being arrested. That broke the ice, and and other people sharing went on from there. We started the discussion in groups of people with their own generation, partly because we wanted people to feel comfortable and to have a chance to pool their questions and their thinking. And that worked relatively well, although several people said maybe we didn't need to spend quite that much time in it. Then we reported back, and that was enough to really start the conversation. And I think the biggest question that we had from people was, how do systems change? Can we reflect on what we learned about systems change through our own activism and start to share that and socialize that? In the evaluation round, people said they had enjoyed the discussion, much as Leanne did in the video, and they wanted opportunities to talk further. And in effect, we've had two possible follow-ups. One is with Ecology Action Ottawa, whose director was there as an observer. They have a youth group, and they are thinking about how can they encourage this kind of conversation. And the second was from someone who worked with the Nature Museum, the Canadian Museum of Nature in Ottawa, who is responsible for designing programming and was wondering how to do that. All right, so what did we learn? We learned that identifying and recruiting the participants really was the biggest part of the work. And most of that we did through personal connections. And I know that was true in several of the other events as well. So we used all our contacts to try and round up people that we didn't know. In fact, a lot of the seniors who were there we knew because we're Climate Legacy. And the youth members we didn't know. So that was a good learning, that you can reach out and get new people. And we received several good suggestions from the people who were there about how to shape it in the future. And we were very pleased with the emphasis on learning about intergenerational conversations. So it is a lot of work to set these up. These are not a normal thing for organizations to be doing, but they are very fruitful. And finally, yes, every time you do one of these, you have to tailor the design because there are so many possible variables and ways of approaching this. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Rieky. That was a great overview of the event. It sounds like a really powerful and such a wonderful video to see from someone who participated, how meaningful it was. So thank you so much. Without further ado, I'll pass it to Kevin and Sharon Lindsey. So I'm just going to quickly intro our next speakers. So Kevin Lindsey is a 30-year tech industry veteran, leadership coach, consultant, and university lecturer. Kevin's climate work began in 2020 as a moderator with the Pachamama Alliance's Game Changer Intensive. He joined the NCAAH board in 2023 and previously held board positions at WildCare in the San Francisco Bay Area and the Calgary Waldorf School. Sharon is an experienced clinical counselor, a somatic experiencing practitioner, a certified yoga therapist, a trained Waldorf remedial teacher, and a climate-aware therapist. She's an active member of both the Climate Psychology Alliance of North America and NCAAH, and completed the Climate Reality Project training in 2024. So thank you so much for being with us here today, and I'll pass it over to you. I think, Kevin, maybe you're starting. There you
Of
go.
course. Thank you. And yeah, it's our pleasure to be joining you here from Nanaimo territory. So, and thanks, Rieky, for that overview of your experience. I remember you telling us about that, and it's just great to hear some more highlights and see that video. Really powerful. So yeah, the big picture, we were very excited about this opportunity to partner with for our kids and look at ways to bring different generations together. Completely agree that it's a powerful way to really explore creative ways, maybe unexpected ways to engage in climate action. Really fantastic. We tend to skew a little bit older in our turnouts here for our climate events. And so this was really an opportunity to look at how we could engage other groups within the community, particularly to hear from some youth voices. So yeah, it was fantastic experience overall. It was great to work with Arish and team in developing the program. We had some time. We had some time to kind of set it up and I think really do it right. And we had a beautiful venue to work with as well. So we really wanted nature to be a key part of the experience. And yeah, so we ended up attracting some people who typically come to Nanaimo Climate Action Hub events and as well as some new people. As Rieky said, it can be a challenge to really find the folks and encourage them to sign up. So there was a little bit of elbow grease and just kind of working the groups that we know and we're plugged into to get people to come. But I think it was really worthwhile for the people that came. So I think that's all I've got to kind of kick off our portion. I'll hand it over to Sharon.
Next slide, please. Hi, everyone. So I'm just going to do an overview of, sort of what we did, some of the strategies we used to warm up the group, help people get to know each other. As Kevin said, we had a pretty diverse group. We would have loved more on the younger end, but it was fantastic to have representation from everywhere, anywhere from, seniors to, I think our youngest maybe was 5 or 6, something like that. So one of the things that we really wanted by way of, creating sort of a cohesive, comfortable group was to kick things off in a really active way. And that's why we chose an environment that had all the natural elements. So we put together a natural elements scavenger hunt. So they were just pictures on a piece of paper. And as people arrived, either in family groups or they just gathered together organically because they arrived at the same time, they were invited to go out into the natural area and identify different plants and trees and mushrooms and various things, and just see how many on the sheet that they could find. And then they were invited to bring back, you can see a little nature table on the slide there, and we just invited them, if you want to bring back a piece of something from nature, which of course we returned at the end, but we created a beautiful kind of communal nature table. So, and then inside we also had the climate awareness timeline that you see there with the colored stickies. And this was actually an idea offered by Rieky for us. And it was really just about, like, when did you first become aware of the climate crisis? And, moments in time. And there was a timeline. And of course, it's so interesting with multi-generation because those, there's a lot sort of collected. You can see 2000 on. But then going back and some of the seniors are able to talk about really early experiences as well. And then we had an under 12 children's activity option. So you can see on the bottom there, the outdoor table. We had our daughter and a friend of hers who have some child camp facilitation experience I think there were 5 of them. and took them out in nature. They played games. They created natural crafts, like you can see the little butterfly on the nature table there. So they had some time with their parents, and then they were engaged in their own activities, mostly outside. They joined us for lunch, and so then 12 plus were all together inside. And we used a structure. So Kevin and I are both work that reconnects. Joanna Macy's work. We're practitioners in this work. So it is something that we bring, that we have the training for. But I think the elements served us well, and could be adapted in a different way, to a future event. And so I'm just going to quickly tell you about those four key elements. And what we did basically is we kind of started whole group. So the 12 and up, so all the sort of older kids and the adults, together in a room, and getting to know each other, sitting at tables. And then we started with gratitude. So they'd come in from this scavenger hunt, and we talked about, like, what are you grateful for? And it was kind of popcorny. We just did it the whole group together. What do you love about this world that we live in? And that's a really fundamental aspect of Joanna Macy's work, is we have to start with gratitude. We have to start with love, because once we connect with what we really love, then we're able to, connect with the pain we feel for how it's being threatened. And that's the next element, which is honoring the emotions. And there's a fairly widely used now, I think, climate emotion wheel out there, and I shared copies with each table, and they had some time then in the second phase of honoring emotions to spend some time just with their emotions, identifying what they felt strongly as individuals, and then we kind of scaffolded it. So they then were with another person sharing their emotions, and then with their table, their group. So we kind of worked up as people were feeling more comfortable. And then new perspectives is really when we kind of mixed up the groups. So they were sitting organically, or maybe with family groups when they arrived, or people they knew. And then for this part, we had a little break, and then we did this part where we really consciously divided up the ages, so that, we had an older person and a younger person, and some middly people, all at the same or different tables, or they're mixed together at the tables rather. And then there's an opportunity to tell their stories, to talk about, what how they've been impacted by climate change, what their concerns are, and also like what they feel individually, like as speaking for their generation as well as individually, I guess, talking about what are your gifts, like what are you bringing to this climate emergency, and so to be witnessed and heard. And then the final part, taking action. We really, again, they were at the table, they were warmed up, they're getting to know each other. So they were talking about, like, yeah, like, this is where I want you to step up, you person from another generation. Like, this is where I see you taking part. And there are beautiful things happening, like, an older person saying to someone with multiple younger children, hey, like, I know you don't have time right now in your life, so here's an offering. I'm going to go to the protests on your behalf, or those kinds of things. So there was a nice exchange and acknowledgement that everyone brings their own gifts and has their own capacities at different times in their life. So that was quite lovely. And then that came to the bigger group, where as a full group, we were asking them, like, what are you going to do? Where are you going from here? And what are you as an individual feeling called to? So I think that's all for this kind of overview, and I'm going to share the next slide, and Kevin will go back.
Yeah, thanks, Sharon. We've used this glows and grows to talk about kind of what we think went great and what we think could be improved upon. So overall, just the open-ended and outdoor opportunities for the under 12s. I think that not only was it a really fun experience for the youngsters, but it also allowed people to come who had, hey, I've got these little ones. What can I do with them? So I think that's a really good thing to do. It's a good best practice. I think the icebreakers were fun and kind of got people going. One thing that Sharon, we probably should have included in here is there's a photo of someone standing at a keyboard, and he's basically a real-time harvester of the cool stuff that's coming, that's emerging, and turns it into a song. And I think that was at the end, and people loved that, I believe. Of course, I mentioned also the being in nature. Um, in terms of what could have been improved upon, I think that we called it Families Talk Climate, of course, and we did get some feedback that people thought, oh, well, I don't have a family, or I'm not part of a family, or I can't get my whole family to come. So we ended up kind of working around that and saying, oh, it's okay, come. We just want, we're gonna create community here when we gather. And so come, like, if you're a teen and you want to come, you're an older person, you want to come, just come, just come and join in on this intergenerational conversation. So I think that the messaging probably hurt us just a little bit. And we did get some feedback. So we had dinner with someone a few weeks ago who said, oh, I would have come if I'd known it was not just for families. I think probably we could have used a little bit more time, a little bit more runway to set up the thing. And again, we ended up with the right number of people. The right people showed up. They came, and the people who came were the right people to be there. So it was fantastic, but it was a little compressed for time. Probably we could have used a bit more time. And and then yeah, just the idea of just the how we organize. I think this is still under evaluation. Is it best to kind of mix the groups up even more, or have people, because we had some people say, hey, I would have liked to have had an opportunity to be with another person for this, and then someone else that said, I would have liked to just stayed with my same group for the entire experience for consistency. So it's hard to know how to approach that one, but I think that's about it. There were definitely some great aspects to it, and always there are learning experiences with these kinds of things. So, all right, back to you, Gabriel. That's it for us.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Sharon and Kevin and Sharon. That was great. And yeah, it sounds like a lovely event. Love this picture too of the kids and music. And yeah, some of our colleagues were there too. And I think it was really enjoyable. So awesome to hear about that. And we have one more speaker. I'll pass it back to Wyanne to talk about the event that she helped to run in PEI. So without further ado, back to you, Wyanne.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Gabrielle. And yeah, thanks so much, Rieky and Sharon and Kevin, for sharing your experiences in your communities. And it was great to hear your first person insights from those events that you ran. Next slide, please, Gabrielle. So I was involved in facilitating a workshop in PEI, which we ran with this model of finding joy in climate solutions. And so this has been a workshop that we've tested in a few different communities. And we chose to do it in PEI partially because that's where I'm from. And so have a lot of connections in the community. And we had some people who had reached out to us who had been longtime climate activists who are interested in getting connected with for our kids, but they didn't have a local team there yet. And so I think it was people who had been involved with different iterations of climate groups over the years. So I think we're involved with a Fridays for Future group, and then had gotten connected to a Seniors for Climate group. And we're really interested in widening their circle to include people from different generations. And so it seemed like a really good opportunity for us to run an intergenerational climate conversation there. So the location, we partnered with the Sir Andrew MacPhail Homestead in PEI. And again, it was a really beautiful location, very connected to nature, and that was really important in terms of the setting. And I think is a learning about the importance of building in connection to land when you can, and opportunities to be on the land and have that integrated into your event. So the Surrender McPhail Homestead is connected to the McPhail Ecological Woods. And so they have all kinds of trails. They run nature-based camps and learning activities for people of all ages. They have, a native plant nursery, and so we were able to connect with those parts of the site and the location, which was really important. Next slide. So the sort of objectives that we set out for this event were to provide a space for a connection with other climate concerned parents, grandparents, and caregivers, to provide a framework for exploring how people can bring their strengths and passions to the work of addressing climate change, and to start to do some action planning. And again, because of this was, I think, a 3-hour workshop. And so 4 hours, I think, with lunch. And so we recognized that we weren't going to be able to get deep into action planning, but we wanted people to come away with some ideas of next steps. Next slide. So the way that we got there was to start with a bit of a visualization exercise. So the climate action Venn diagram is based on the work of Ariana Elizabeth Johnson, and she's actually compiled another book called What If We Got It Right? And so she really says it's so hard for us to take action or to connect with sort of hope, active hope, if we don't really have an idea of what it might look like to get it right. And so really encourages us to do some of that, like backcasting, to sort of imagine ourselves in a future, and if we were getting a response to climate change right. And so I think to open us up to starting to think about kind of hopeful action, we start this workshop with this exercise of sort of standing on the other side and being in a world where we are getting a response to climate change right, and identifying the things that are happening, the things that we're feeling and seeing and experiencing in that moment, so that we can connect with what are the steps that it might take to get us there. And so we opened with that visualization exercise. And then we had some guided time working with the climate action Venn diagram. And so there's a photo of it here on the slide, but basically it looks at, what are the things that bring you joy or meaning or satisfaction? What are the skills and experiences that you bring? What are the networks and resources that you can draw on? And what is the work that needs doing? And then at the intersection of all of those, at the overlap of those different spheres, is the sort of your personal climate action, and Ariana Elizabeth Johnson really emphasizes that there's tons of things that need doing in this work of climate, but you don't need to do everything. So to connect with the things that bring you, joy, with the things that you are resourced to do, to think about what are the things in your sphere that need to happen, and then to identify what are the actions that you can take so that you don't necessarily feel overwhelmed, and also so that you're leaning into your special skills and magic that you bring to the work. And so we did that, spending a little bit of time filling it out together. And then we took some time talking about what were the climate actions that were identified in the group, and sharing that. And we did that as a kind of all together collectively, because we were a relatively small group. And so we had time to just share what was coming up from working with the climate action Venn diagram, and to talk about and to surface those kind of collective and individual actions that people had identified, and to think about, oh, how to be able to also do a little bit of mapping of, oh, this person is connected with the university, and this person, has a connection with this community group, and maybe those two, there might be some overlap there. So we were able to identify there some networking and intersections that happened on the spot. Can you go to the next slide? So, kind of, using that glows and grows model, which I really love. I think there were some similar things that came out in some of the learnings that we had. So, I think the childcare offering. So, like, we also offered kind of parallel children's programming for the young ones. And there were, I think, 5 children. They're not all pictured here, but 5 children that participated. And I think, again, that is really important in terms of accessibility, and really allowing parents of young children or caregivers of young children to come. But also, being in a space where climate is being discussed, and being able to be out in nature and doing nature-based activities, I think, is also, we love what we have a connection to. We protect what we love and what we have a connection to, and building that appreciation for nature as part of the events that we run, I think, is really important. Another thing that we did was to create a lending library of climate books, like What If We Get It Right, and others that we were able to leave at this location. So it was a little bit of a something that the community was able to do, and to kind of create that touch point for them. And we shared sort of the TED Talk that Ariana Elizabeth Johnson does as a resource, so people would be familiar a little bit with this activity, and we also encourage people to spend more time with it than what we can do in the small group. I will say that, again, we did have a relatively small turnout. It was nice in terms of we were able to have deep conversations, um, and to have a lot of sharing amongst the full group. But we would have also liked to have had more people in the room. And it was a challenge, I think, partially because of the timing. Doing something, I think it was like the late July in Prince Edward Island, and there were many other competing events happening at the same time. And so I think, just again, more lead time to make sure that you're not going to end up with that issue of competing events. Potentially, it was lovely to be able to enjoy summer weather, but people are really busy often in the summers, and so that can be a challenge. I think that the Families Talk Climate kind of idea, again, some people didn't necessarily see themselves in that. And I think, intergenerational climate conversations maybe is a more accessible, more people will connect with that, and recognize, oh, I don't have to be coming with my full family, or I don't have to be identifying at that. And I think what we were really hoping to get at was that intergenerational aspect. And so, I think similarly, that learning for us. But I think, that ultimate end goal, that people built connections with each other. I think there is something really beautiful about finding joy in climate solutions for an intergenerational group, because there are so many different experiences. There is different access to networks and resources and ideas that come up from that, and people are positioned really differently. And I think that can be really a lovely way of surfacing some of that. So, in the end, we did find that people were really motivated to stay connected, to, bring the inspiration that they drew from this into their community projects, into their work at schools and universities, and into kind of conversations, at the provincial and municipal level about climate action. So I think that's all for me, and I'll hand it back to you, Gabrielle.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Wyanne. Yeah, what a great cross-section of different events across the country that were, I think, were super successful and gave us so much to think about and consider for our own events and ways of generating conversation. So we have about 10 minutes left, and we wanted to open the floor if there are any questions from those who've joined us today. I don't know if anyone has put any in the chat. Um, but I could start by asking, I guess I'm curious for all of you whether there's anything that really surprised you about these events, unexpected sort of points of connection or ways that the conversation went. I don't know if anyone has a response to that and wants to jump in.
I'll just share, I don't know if it really well, I guess it surprised me a little bit, but it actually pleased me more than anything was that in a couple of cases we had young people like teenagers dragging their parent along for I thought that was fantastic. It made me happy. Just that it wasn't necessarily what I would have imagined. So it was great to see.
That's great. Anyone else notice anything or Rieky, I don't know if you're speaking, but you're on mute.
There we
And
go. Okay, there we go. One of the things that I've been thinking about is whether there's an opportunity for uh, young parents or adults to speak with grandparents. It's one thing to include kids, but I'm wondering what the conversation would be if it was more focused on adult children and grandparents. Because I think there might be there might be an opportunity there for more mutual support and learning. So that's one of the things I wondered. The second thing that I thought about, three things that occurred to me. The second thing was about that question that came up in Ottawa about systemic change. And how we have examples, for example, women's rights or stopping tobacco use, cigarette smoking during my lifetime, certainly, which I would consider systemic changes, where whole cultures change their behavior, change their laws, change their attitudes and beliefs. Can we think a little bit more about that? And the third thing that occurred to me was Bill McKibben's new book, Here Comes the Sun, where he says, particularly not in the US, but in other places, the shift to renewable energy is coming much, much faster than he had anticipated. And he's very encouraged by that. And I'm wondering if there's a way that we can use that in our work, particularly in communities, but also with politicians at the whatever level we work with them to highlight this. This is again the beginning of a shift, but it's a very positive one. So those are the things that occurred to me. They're somewhat observations, but I'd love other people's reflections and insights as to what they think the next steps might be for intergenerational work.
a great follow-up question. Yeah, does anyone else in the group have any thoughts on where you think conversations could go from here or opportunities that have come to mind since the event?
I'll chime in a little bit. Yeah, I think that since the event, just the whole area of telling the right story, not telling the right story, exploring different ways of telling the stories. And I think Rieky, you touched on, just this idea that, throughout generations, we've tackled some pretty big things. And so really trying to bring about like we there's a lot of science in the way we talk about climate. There's a lot of numbers and metrics and all of those kinds of things. And so perhaps a way to get through in a more effective way is through just better storytelling and finding really interesting ways of resonating and meeting people where they are at.
Definitely. Wyanne, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think, I was reflecting on that question of like what maybe stood out or for me from or was surprising. And I think I'm always a little bit surprised at how um, isolated people still feel in their experiences of navigating the climate crisis and, the feelings that that brings up. And, so often people will find their way to an event, a For Kids event, and it included this one. And they'll say, I just haven't found people that I feel like I can't talk about how I'm feeling about this, or I don't have spaces, where I can talk about this. And I think, going back to that, telling the story, and also that point about, building kind of that intergenerational solidarity and support, even between, young parents and grandparents, I think finding ways where we can reflect on hard times that people have been through before. I remember my mom telling me about, them doing like drills during like the Cold War and getting under, their desks and things like that. And that was really impactful for me to think about, oh, what it must have been like to be a child during that time. And, I think maybe that would help me as navigating as a parent of young kids now through, the climate crisis. And so thinking about, yeah, how we've made it through difficult times before and how we can support each other kind of going forward. I think is really important. And just breaking down, I think the feelings of isolation that we have, that we can't talk about it, that we can't, because I think we have to be talking about it. We have to be talking about what's coming up for us, but also what we can do about it together, and not making it sort of like an individualized, we all have to figure out how we're going to do this on our own. And so I think by holding these kind of dialogues, we kind of break down some of those feelings of isolation, and we build up that solidarity and feeling of community between people and between generations.
Thanks so much, Wyanne. Yeah, that's a great perspective. Anyone else have any thoughts or want to chime in? Ashish, go for it.
Yeah. Hi everyone, I'm Ashish. Uh, I was just curious about when we put generations of people together. If you talk about grandparents to the parents and children to the grandchildrens, like there comes four generation might be sometimes. They all have different feelings and they have different ideas about climate actions and climate crisis, and that might be confusing sometimes. Grandparents might be thinking in different way for climate action, and the parents like who are into this innovative world, they think in different action, and now children they have a different action, but we don't know what action should be followed so that we can mitigate the whole community's requirement. I just want to know how can we think about the actual solutions rather than being into thinking about every perspective, because we have no time for mistakes now. There's no room for mistake. We have to triple our actions, and if you again hit and trial, then it's of no use. We're just generating a waste. Wasting our time, we're wasting our energy, we're wasting our mother earth, and our children are in high danger. Yeah.
Thanks, Ashish. Does anyone want to jump in with any thoughts on that?
Well, maybe I can. Like my reaction is to say what the perfect is the enemy of the good. If we to me, what is required is more people saying they are concerned about it and saying they want action and taking action themselves. And maybe they're different actions. Maybe grandparents will have different actions than parents or children. And to me, that's okay. Our job as people who want to support climate action is to make sure that all of those voices are heard and to make it possible for people to have these discussions and to know, for politicians in particular and business leaders, to know that we all care. I mean, look at what happened with Elbows Up. You know, within a very short time, people made it clear that they did not want Canada to be the 51st state. Are we going to win that battle? I don't know. Are there different actions that people need to be taking? Yes. And what is important is the sense of solidarity that we are gaining by knowing that we're together in this. And to me, like if we keep having discussions about what's the perfect action, we're not going to get that kind of solidarity feeling, if you like, or community feeling that it's okay to talk about this. It's important to talk about this. It's important to do whatever we can. And that's how we'll make the difference. So, it's true what you say, that it's important to be effective, but I think it's not the only issue.
I'd love to respond to you also, Ashish. I think that these conversations, even across 4 generations, end up surfacing actions that weren't even understood or appreciated in any way. So, for example, we might get a young person who's very, very aware, but has no personal resources in terms of funding, money or anything to do anything like that they feel is substantial. So they might say to their grandparents, "Well, one thing you can do is move your wealth out of a big bank into a credit union," and then they do it, and we've seen that happen. And so that elderly grandparent, perhaps, who doesn't even drive a car anymore, and I'm speaking of a very specific example in my mind, right, Sharon? Who, that is the one concrete thing that they can do. And it took a younger generation to sort of articulate it to them that that is the one thing that they can do. They probably can't go out and march anymore with signs and show up to an action, but that is something they can do. So I think it actually ends up surfacing more of those concrete actions that people weren't aware of.
Thanks so much, Rieky and Kevin. Anyone else before we wrap up?
I was just going to share, if it's okay, a quote from Joanna Macy kind of addresses this. She said, "You don't need to do everything. Do what calls your heart. Effective action comes from love. It's unstoppable and it's enough."
Thanks so much, Sharon. That's a lovely quote, and yeah, sort of speaks to, I think, the ethos of this work and how much was sort of gained by these conversations, and hopefully a lot of community and intergenerational dialogue and work can move forward from these events as well. So thank you so much for sharing that. I think we'll wrap up because we're sort of at the hour here, but thank you so much. Maybe I'll pass it quickly to Wyanne for a quick closing, if that works.
Yeah, well, I just thank you to everybody who joined today. And I thought it was, yeah, so many insights from the different case studies in the different communities. And I think that was really rich and useful. And I do hope that we can continue to follow up on this and find ways to take the next steps. I dropped the link to the toolkit in the chat and we'll send it out to everyone who registered as well. And it will be hosted on the For Kids website, and we'll continue to add to it and update it as we continue to learn. And, as Rieky said, it's not a one size fits all. I think we do definitely have to, everyone needs to think about your goals and your community and what feels like the right fit. But we hope this can offer some support and some resources and some ideas to people who might want to host intergenerational dialogues in their own community. So I just want to say thank you so much to everyone for joining.